Hey y'all, today we are going to talk about logical fallacies. So these are going to be like the correct answers to the logical fallacy chart that you already tried to fill in. And I think it's helpful to have y'all go through that chart on your own first and try and draw those connections on your own to see what the error in reasoning is. So as we go through this video, you can either there's two places you can do it. So you can either type it into your chart and fix the wrong answers you put, or you can just type it directly into your notes, or you can just leave it blank and then just come back to this video as a reference point. But I would say, depending on how you learn, I would say try and type it somewhere just because you want to be familiar with these, because this could be important content for your persuasive speech that we're going to end up writing pretty soon. So do with that what you will. But I would say type it down somewhere, probably in your notes. So let's get started. The first logical fallacy y'all went over was non sequitur. For the answers, I'm going to have quite a bit typed out, just because some of them I think are a little more complex than others. But you only have to type the bolded words. If you feel you understood pretty well what non sequitur meant, this is all you really need to know. But if you need to know more, you can type out the rest of it. So you only have to type the bolded words for all of these answers. So non sequitur means it does not follow. These are pretty easy to spot just because there's no connection to them whatsoever. It's I love tomatoes, so I'm going to learn to speak Mandarin Chinese. My drama kids, technically it's a drama and debate class. They did some really interesting debates just because they haven't learned how to research yet and they're middle schoolers. So there was just one debate last semester. These girls were debating about which was better, water or Gatorade. And this girl was like, yes, Gatorade has a better flavor, but sodas are proven to make you have to go to the bathroom more frequently. And we were all just like, what are you talking about? We're not even talking about sodas. So it does not follow. The things have nothing to do with each other. So that would be what a non sequitur would be like. Next, we had a slippery slope. And the example was well, if you don't expose your kid to germs, he's never going to get sick. He's never going to build up his immune system to fight illness. And he's going to be a sickly adult. So it's a snowball fallacy. So if you've heard about the snowball method of paying off debt, it's okay, you put in a little bit, then a little bit more money, a little bit more until the snowball builds up. So it's you're exaggerating these potential consequences of an event or choice. So yeah, those things could happen hypothetically, but it's definitely exaggerating those potential consequences. Pharmaceutical companies and political ads really like these. It's oh, if we let this politician into the White House, pretty soon your children will all be corrupted by the thing. And it's okay, yeah, potentially, but you're exaggerating the potential consequences, excuse me, that lead up to that. Next, we have post hoc ergo propter hoc. This one says, the rooster crowed and the sun came up. Therefore, the rooster made the sun come up. So it literally means after this, therefore, because of this. So it's placing credit or blame to something simply because it happened prior to another event or situation. So yeah, these two things happened, but that doesn't necessarily mean there's a connection at all. Next, we have false dichotomy. So that root word di means two. So it's falsely presenting only two options. So it says we either have to cut Medicare or leave a huge debt for our children. And those are the only two options. So false dichotomy is presenting only two options as consequences for any particular choice. And again, politicians kind of love this one, where it's oh, you're either with us or you're against us. It's very much appealing to fear. And like I mentioned earlier, just using emotional language is not good. You gotta have those fact-based appeals. And only a Sith deals in absolutes. Now, you may be thinking to yourself that, or maybe you're not, I don't know, but non sequitur, slippery slope, and post hoc all sound kind of similar. So let's talk about the distinction between those. I believe y'all have this slide, but it's at the end of your logical fallacies. I just want to go ahead and knock it out since we're already talking about these three. So you'll just have to scroll down a little bit to get to your slide that looks like this. So the similarity between non sequitur, post hoc ergo propter hoc, and slippery slope is that they're all trying to make some kind of connection between two ideas. So for non sequitur, where it was I like Chinese food, I should get my nails done, or whatever it was. And then post hoc ergo propter hoc, like after this, therefore because of this, like the rooster and the sun coming up. And then slippery slope, it's like exaggerating those potential consequences. So it's trying to create connection between consequences, creating connection between two things that might have caused each other, and then trying to create a connection between two totally random things. So the similarities are all trying to create some kind of connection. The difference between them, though, so non sequitur has no logical connection at all. Like, I like curly fries, I should move to Sweden. I don't think Sweden is known for their curly fries. If they are, please correct me. But it's like, oh, that has no logical connection whatsoever. Post hoc ergo propter hoc is trying to imply a cause and effect just because a connection exists. So it's like, oh, okay, like, yeah, the rooster crowed and then the sun came up. All right, well, the rooster crowing must have caused it. So that's trying to imply cause and effect just because there is a connection. And slippery slope is trying to imply cause and effect when there is no direct cause at all. So for post hoc ergo propter hoc, those things like happen pretty close to each other. Like the rooster crowed and then the sun came up. Okay, so they must have caused each other. But for slippery slope, like it's like, yeah, that is a potential consequence, but it's really exaggerated. So the cause isn't direct. Um, I know this difference is really small. As long as you're looking out to try and make sure your connections made and your persuasive speeches are strong, I think you'll do a good job at avoiding all of these. Just be careful not to exaggerate and make sure you have a direct cause for saying something is going to cause something else. Make sure you're not just saying cause and effect exists just because there is a little connection. Make sure it's genuine and make sure your connections are logical and you'll do fine. Next, we have red herring, which is pretty popular. So it switches the focus from the original argument presented. This is a pretty common one that I found amongst high school students, especially last semester in one of my classes. This is a pretty big one that we encountered a lot. So this example says, our teacher should not give homework over the weekend because we have a religious holiday. It's a teacher's responsibility to respect our religion. So the issue is against homework, but now you're kind of manipulating it into being about religion because you probably think you're going to win that argument and probably not the homework one. So make sure you stay focused on the actual argument that's being presented. So red herring, it switches the focus. A red herring is a fish. And so I've seen cartoons that are just like, it's like a person standing there holding a fish and someone's like, why did you bring that here? What does that have to do with anything? So literally, just imagine you're in an argument with someone and all of a sudden they're holding a red fish. And you're like, what does that have to do with anything? That's a red herring. It switches the focus from the original argument being presented. Next is a bandwagon argument. This one we can fall victim to quite a lot. And high school students can fall victim to it as well. So last semester I had a student, they were doing some kind of debate about like, I think it was it was something about like having like armed teachers at school or something. I can't remember exactly what it was. But they polled one teacher and asked like, "Hey, do you think teachers should have guns?" And they said, "Yeah." And they were like, "Oh, we asked this one teacher." And it's like, "So you think that we should agree with you because this one teacher out of the entire school agreed with the position?" And so that's just weak persuasion. It's also going to connect to another logical fallacy we'll discuss in a second. You're kind of saying, oh, like this one teacher said it, and so you should all do it because like this teacher's really respected, and so we should all like it too. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second because I was looking at ants and I hate ants. So this one says like the majority of people like ants more than A Bug's Life, so ants must be the more quality film. And so we're like, oh man, like this person had a really great time with it, or this survey says the thing, people really like it, but like, what about the actual facts of it? Like, is it a more quality film or not? So don't try and persuade someone to do things for me. Oh well, everybody's doing it. Like, or like, oh, this one person likes it. Like, make sure it's actually based off of persuasive evidence. Next, we had appeal to false authority. So this example said, Michael Jordan wears Hanes, so you should wear them too. The treatment of a non-expert as an expert. So celebrity endorsements. Like whenever you see like the Got Milk ads, it's like, why should I trust like this singer to tell me about like this science behind how milk makes me strong and whatever. Like, they're not a scientist. They're just a cool celebrity. And it's like, oh, yeah, they like milk. All right, well, I'm going to like milk too. So appeal to false authority is not super great. It'd be like if you were talking about trying to persuade us to like change some kind of important rule at Shiloh, but instead of citing like one of our deans, you went and asked like, if you asked me, if you cited like me in one of your speeches, it's like, well, that's cool, but like I'm not the one making the rules of the school. So like, why are you citing me when it's like I didn't make the rule? I don't know. To actually use like good sources and actual experts in your research. Next, we have ad hominem. So this one says like, oh, my opponent should not be elected mayor because he had an affair 5 years ago. So it's not really talking about the issues that this mayor is bringing up or that they're like what their platform is. It's like, oh, well, here's something about their personal life. And like, yeah, like that might be something important we want to consider before we vote for a mayor. But like, it's attacking more of like the person than like the argument they're making. So like imagine like more in context if like it's like, oh, like these two candidates for mayor are having a debate about like the issues and this mayor is like, oh, I want to increase taxes for schools. And then this other guy says, well, my opponent should not be mayor because he had an affair. It's like, okay, well, you're attacking the person, not the argument being made. So it helps to put that one a little bit more in context. But so ad hominem is when the speakers are attacking the person making the argument and not the argument itself. Next, we have hasty generalization. This one's pretty obvious. Sample size is too small. This one can be really tricky for us to fall into. So again, like the student who did the debate about like the teachers having guns in school, and they asked like one teacher. So that sample size is probably a little too small. Or this example is pretty funny. It's like I have several white friends, and every one of them loves country music. All white people love country music. I think it's very funny. I think we know that's not true. It's like a stereotype involves imposing on one person a generalization made about the group based on a small sample. So that's not great and not good for persuasion. Next, we have straw man. So if your parent says, you need to clean out your backpack, and the kid is like, you know I'm ADD. Why can't you just accept me? Your parent was not attacking you for being ADD. That's not what they were talking about. The issue is about cleaning out a backpack, but you changed it. And so straw man is when you change the opponent's position and then attack it. Red herring and straw man are very similar, but red herring is a diversion or like a distraction. So for that previous one example for red herring that we did, it was like, oh, my teacher can't give me homework because it's a religious holiday and it's her responsibility to protect my religious freedom. And it's like, okay, well, the argument was about not having homework, and now you're making it about freedom of religion. So that one's like kind of like diverting or distracting. But for straw man, it's a distortion. And so it's like taking your words out of context or kind of like manipulating them. And so the kid's trying to guilt that parent into like, oh, you made me feel bad for being ADD because you were making me clean that backpack. The parent's like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay, you don't have to do it. And it's like, kid wins. So it's like changing their their opponent's position and then attacking it. So that's not very good. So make sure that you like are fully clear on what your opponent actually believes in, what they stand for, because you may think that like you're going to win the argument and like seem smarter by doing this, but like your opponent really quickly will be like, oh, actually that's not what I said. What I said was this. Maybe you didn't understand me, and then you sound like an idiot. So be very careful. Make sure you really take good notes if you're involved in a debate. Make sure you are listening carefully. Make sure you really know what your opponent actually stands for, so you don't accidentally fall into this kind of trap. Next, we have a false analogy. This is a fun one and one that we see all the time. My father-in-law did a false analogy today, and I tried to remember what it was, but I cannot remember. If I think of it, I'll put it on Google Classroom. But you're comparing two ideas or situations that really are not fully comparable. These can be really tough because they seem really logical, but the consequences end up being so drastically different that the analogy kind of falls apart. It's like, for example, choosing not to do homework is like choosing not to brush your teeth. The long-term consequences outweigh the short-term benefits. Which, like, yeah, like that makes sense. But like in essence, though, those consequences are Very different though. Another example, if y'all listen to the comedian John Mulaney, he does one skit where he was talking about his time being a writer for SNL, and he was writing for like an award show. And he wrote a skit or some kind of joke about little people, but he used the word midget. And then one of like the producers for the show comes in and they go, "Hey, you can't put that word on TV." And John Mulaney goes, "Well, I'd really like to." And the guy goes, "You can't say the word midget. Midget is as bad as the N word." And John Mulaney is like, "No, you know how I know they're not equally bad? Because you're saying the word midget and you won't even say what the N word is. If you're comparing the badness of two words, the worst one's probably the one that you won't even say." So it's like, yeah, I see what you're trying to say. Like, oh, these two words are offensive. But it's like, okay, well, false analogy because one of them you won't even say. So like the consequences of using like one of those words. Um, sorry, I got distracted looking at my phone. The consequences of using those words is going to be pretty different. So it's like, yeah, okay, like I see where you're going, but like really they're not fully comparable. Next, we have circular reasoning. Honestly, I really hate this one. I'm bad at catching it, so if you use it, you probably won't notice. This one's a little tricky for me. Basically, it means that it makes the conclusion the major premise, so it's trying to pass it off as undisputed fact. Um, Mr. Sutterfield talks about this a lot in his apologetics luncheons that he does, when he says like, Christians will try and say, "Oh, the Bible is the inerrant word of God because the Bible says it is." And so he does a really good job of like breaking that down, actually giving us like evidence of like, okay, here's how we know like that the Bible is trustworthy, that it's the inerrant word of God, without just being like, "Oh, Bible says so." So that would be circular reasoning. It's like goes in a circle. It's like, okay, like I'm trying to prove that the Bible is the inerrant word of God by saying that the Bible says so. So that'd be an example. Another one would be like, "Oh, Bigfoot isn't real because there's no proof of his existence." Like I'm trying to prove Bigfoot isn't real, and that's my conclusion, but I'm putting it as the major premise, so I'm trying to pass it off as fact. Again, I'm not really great at catching these. They're kind of complicated. They're tricky for me. Um, Basically, just make sure you don't try and pass off something that you're trying to prove as like a fact. Don't know why the transition was weird. Oh, I love this one. So this one, as equivocation means the changing of a word's meaning in the course of an argument. So this one's kind of funny. So it says, "For lunch, soup is better than nothing. Nothing is better than pizza. Therefore, soup is better than pizza." No one would ever agree to that because the word nothing, it's a, oh, pickle, I forgot what the word is. It's a homonym. So a synonym means that two words have one meaning, but a homonym means it's one word with multiple meanings. So here, the word nothing is a homonym. Because if you read it, it's like soup is better than nothing. So it's kind of like your last resort. So, like, okay, I'd rather have soup than nothing, I guess. But then here, it's like nothing is better than pizza. So it's like, okay, yeah, like here, it's like, oh, well, soup sucks, better than eating nothing. Then here, you're like, nah, like nothing's better than pizza. Like, pizza's the best. But then you're like, okay, well, if you use those two words that, like, yeah, like it's one word, but there's two different meanings here. So that's a homonym. So you gotta make sure you're careful to make sure you don't like, misuse words like that. One example I saw in like, a comic strip once, it was this guy like, breaking into a store, and the owner was like, "Hey, you can't steal that." And the guy's like, "Well, baseball players steal all the time, so why can't I?" And it's like, okay, that's a different kind of steal, though. So equivocation, it's very funny. We should be careful that we don't use it in our debates or our persuasive speeches. And I think lastly, not gonna lie, no idea how to say that. I've had students try and Google it before. Mostly people get tu quoque. Some get tu, I don't know. I forgot what the other ones are. We're just gonna say tu quoque, and we're just gonna roll with it because after this video, we're probably never gonna say it out loud ever again, but you can just see it and you'll think it. So tu quoque, it literally means you too. So it's attempting to break down an opponent's argument based on hypocrisy. This can be a big one that we encounter a lot. It's like, oh, my PE teacher is overweight, so I don't need to listen to him to eat a healthy diet or exercise regularly because clearly he doesn't do it. But like the advice is still good, even though he's a hypocrite. Or maybe he has like another reason that he's overweight. Like maybe he like has like a gland issue or something. I don't know. So tu quoque is trying to break down the argument based on hypocrisy. Oh, if the opponent can't follow his own advice, it must be invalid. Okay, it's not necessarily true. There may be lots of reasons they don't follow their advice, that we're not seeing evidence of it. And the advice is still good, even if they don't follow it themselves. And that is all of our logical fallacies. Yeah, so fill those in your notes. And don't use logical fallacies in your speeches. We're going to do a fun, well, I think it's fun. We're going to do a potentially fun activity tomorrow. So make sure you feel confident with these. Maybe go back and look at your chart and see some of the examples. Be like, oh, I see why that's that. Let me know if you have any questions. Have a good one.